Hi, it's Andrea here with New Avenue Realty Group, and I have Njeri London.
Hey y'all, I'm Njeri London. I'm here with NPR title and attorney Njeri London.
Yes, yes. So today we're going to talk about love in real estate. And this is part of Consult and Attorney, okay?
Yes. yes.
So in real estate, there's so many different things that come up. And one of the things that I see a lot are just couples in real estate. Which most people, as you know, most people who buy homes are married.
Right, true.
The next set are single women.
Correct.
And then you have your unmarried couples.
Right.
And then you have like single men. So that's kind of how it goes with who's buying real estate. However, the question never really comes up, but I think some consideration may need to be had.
Exactly.
About people buying homes
who ain't married or married.
Yes. We're going to talk about it all. So we're going to talk about love and real estate. So as a realtor, I'm not able to legally give advice.
Right.
But there are certain things that I do think, and I do think people need to protect themselves no matter what.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of things that people don't know.
Yeah.
So even as a single woman, like I'm a single woman who's purchased a home, but what happens when I find my better half?
What I tell you. Go buy y'all a house together. That's your house as a single woman. And the reason why, and I'm not saying, in some situations, you will have it to where your new spouse will move into your current home.
Yeah.
The thing is, you need to understand what that triggers if you do that. And so, especially if your new spouse moves into your existing home with you, now you are triggering homestead, so it's now his homestead. So if he has debt, guess what? It attaches to the property.
Didn't I know that one?
Yeah, because it's now his homestead.
That makes sense. It makes sense.
And
vice versa.
Exactly, and vice versa. So in addition to that, if you were to ever sell that home, he will have to join in on signing over the documents. And we've had it at times where the person had the home while they were single, and then they end up getting married, and now they're trying to figure out, well, why do they need to sign? Why do they need to see this closing disclosure? Because they didn't buy this house with me. Yes, however, Texas is a community property state. So that's why it's really important to have these conversations, because there are other states that aren't community property states, so it doesn't trigger the homestead laws and the community property laws that come into effect whenever you are married with real estate in Texas.
Yes.
So it's really important that if you are in one of those unique situations, that you speak to somebody, so that way well, we can definitely we're going to talk more about some of the examples and some things that come up that Andrea has seen in her business, and I've seen on the title side, that people wouldn't think that they would that it will create a situation, and it does.
Yes. One question that I've always gotten that a lot of people always ask is when one person of the relationship is on the loan, so technically they're on everything. They're like, well, they shouldn't have to sign paperwork because the home is only in my name. And then you have to remind them,
that's not how it is. So typically what will happen is you'll have a situation where maybe one spouse is the qualifying spouse for the loan. And so they decide that they're not going to put the other spouse technically on the loan paperwork. However, one thing you always hear from title companies, we always tell you, hey, if you're married, you bring your spouse, because you may think that your spouse is not going to sign any documents, but they are going to sign documents. And so in a situation where you're buying the home and that one spouse is on the loan and the other spouse is not on the loan, that person is going to sign, but they're going to sign as a non-borrowing spouse.
Right.
So so it puts evidence out there that, we're acknowledging that you have a spouse. They're just not on this loan. So it, it's not going to affect their credit or, what have you. However, it is going to be, they will have title. And so because Texas community property state, unless there's some type of identifying information saying that, hey, you're married and this is going to be that married person's sole and separate property,
Mm-hmm.
which most banks don't really have that unless you're doing like investments or something like that.
I've seen it in investing.
But, generally when this is going to be your homestead property, meaning this is the home that you're going to reside in as your residence, then you're not going to see that type of language on the deed. So you will see your name as well as your spouse's name, or it'll say you as a married person, which indicates to everyone in the world that, hey, there's another person out here who's going to have to sign some paperwork if you ever decide to sell this house.
Yes. And a lot of people just don't know. I've gotten that question plenty of times. They're like, well, I'm the only person on the loan. Yeah. Technically, yeah, but not really.
Right.
So those are the thoughts that I always wanted to always have an attorney come out and say it, because a lot of people do think that, and I've seen it in different situations. Let's talk about people who are a couple buying a home. As an attorney, what would you advise they do? Not Jerry. The attorney Jerry.
Jerry's gonna say, don't do it.
Attorney Jerry.
Okay.
Yes.
Understand what this looks like. Mm-hmm. So, let's say, for instance, that one person, because you're not married. So, because you're not married, you're not going to trigger any of the community property laws. Mm-hmm. However, you will, if anything was to happen to that one person, let's say, for whatever reason, one of the person in the relationship decides that it's not going to work out, and they decide to move on their merry way. If you go and try to sell that property, and you all didn't do the proper steps in order to get that other person's name off the property, guess what? They got to come back and sign. And what I've run into is they don't care how long. I had a situation where they had been together for 10 years.
Ooh, tell us about
10 years. And the guy was like, well, it's my house. She gave me the house, and, she ain't paid a bill. Okay, where is the paperwork? And, he ended up doing what he called a quitclaim deed, which Texas does not recognize quitclaim deeds. So don't do it.
Remember last year I tried to buy a house with a quitclaim?
Yeah, and we would say, no, don't do it.
It was a great investment property.
But they was like, nah, we went. I was like, well, can't do like a deed without warrant. She was like, nah, they quitclaimed it.
Yeah.
I said, don't do it. don't do it. And we'll talk about that at another time, why it wasn't a good idea for her to buy it. But so because of this, as title, we have to go, and we have to, our role is to make sure there is clear title passed to the new owner. And so we, had to let them know that, hey, it's not going to be recognized, even though this is what someone told you to do. The underwriter is not going to insure this property, so we're going to have to get a full-on general warranty deed or, some type of deed that is not a quitclaim deed.
Yes.
Well, guess what? Oh, girl was like, where is the money? I will sign, provided that I get some of this money. Well, he's like, well, that's not fair. I've been doing everything in this house for 10 years. You've done nothing. And now you want money? Well, guess what? They should have thought about that. And that's why even when, you'll have sometimes situations where people are getting information from those who are not an attorney. Who don't understand what, in real estate, what would be acceptable if they wanted to sell.
Right.
And that was a situation where, yes, the quitclaim deed worked for what he needed it for at that time, but it wouldn't work for him to convey property. And so, it took some time. I can't even remember if we ever closed a transaction, but it took a while because it was a money grab for her. She was like, 10 years, he about to get all this money. I'm about to get a good 30,000, 40,000, just laying in the cut, not doing nothing. I mean, I'm like, well.
That actually, just a story. That happened on a buyer deal I was on. Ooh. And if they're watching this, they remember it. It was a hot mess, y'all. I represented the buyers in this transaction, and we got all the way up to closing, all the way 2 days before closing. And the seller was going through a divorce, and he was trying to get over him not having to include that from the wife, and the wife still had to sign on paperwork because they were like, we don't know if this is not her property. We don't know, so she needs to sign off the paperwork. He didn't want to do it. And the wife was like, I'll sign for some cash.
Hey.
And he was not willing to do that. And, but at the end of the day, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so we lost out on the house. We were quickly able to go find another one like a week later.
Oh, you didn't close?
No, we didn't close.
Oh.
We didn't close it off. And what I learned from my broker, so this is, me and Jerry have been having these conversations for a long time.
A long time, yeah.
But what I learned from my broker, and please correct us if we're wrong, because we're not attorneys, but what I learned was, it does not matter if the person never lived in the house.
Does not.
If that person bought a broom to sweep the floor in that house.
Yep.
She said it could be theirs.
Exactly. Matter of fact, they don't have to buy a thing for the house. If you buy a house and you are married,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not you were living together, it can be in a strange, unless there is some identifying information that signifies to the world that yes, I may be married, but this is my sole and separate property, it's community property. By default, it's community property.
Even if you had it before.
Even if you had it before, by default.
See, now this becomes girl talk. Because I have told you plenty of times, I'm like, we might just have to have a house and we both live beside each other.
I got my braids all falling off. My braids.
No, it's because of things like this. Like you would have to set up some type of paperwork. And I've had conversations like this with friends too.
Yeah.
And the friend was like, "Are you telling me this as a friend or as a realtor?" And I was like, "Technically, I can't say it as a realtor, so I'm saying it as a friend."
Right.
But okay, so also Texas being a community property state.
Uh-huh.
If a couple that's unmarried purchases a home,
right.
How does Texas recognize that relationship?
They just recognize it as joint tenants. Like, pretty much you're just two people, off the street that are buying a home. So the community property laws don't go into effect. However, there have been situations where, again, two people are together, one person leaves, other person stuck with the house. They ain't been with this person I don't know how many years, and they're trying to sell the property. And people, I don't know why people forget that, I bought this house with somebody else's name on it. Like, conveniently, like, so how you just forgot that you had a whole nother person who bought this house with you?
Because when they out your life, they out your life.
Yeah, but you know what? So that ain't how it works when you trying to sell some property.
Okay.
So with that being said, he had to go find her. Luckily, this situation was a lot better, and he was able to get her to sign the paperwork and everything. But it took a minute because, again, it's some money. It's some money to be made, and I just been in the cut. And so I don't care who you are, where you are. If it's some free money, people gonna want the free money. Yeah. I have to do nothing but sign. I got to sign and I get some money. Yeah. Like what do we say? Where the money resides? True. So, but there are things like that you definitely need to be mindful of, because also you can be in a relationship with someone, and let's say and this even happens for married people if they don't have the same kids, but if that person was to pass, guess what? That 50% passes on to their people, and now you got family members you got to deal with. So even if you were to be in a situation like that, if y'all decide to call it quits or whatever, make sure you consult an attorney to make sure that your assets, meaning your property assets, are protected. Because even in marriages, I've seen it where people have been married and they get a divorce. Well, then guess what? They don't put in a divorce decree that one of the people have the house. And so with that being said, now we're like, okay, yeah, you're divorced. Like, well, he gave me the house. Well, we don't see it in a divorce decree. So, unless it says in the divorce decree, they got to come back and sign. So you need to make sure that, because a lot of people like to do, to save money, they decide to do the divorces themselves, or as we call it, pro se. Well, if you decide to do it pro se, then you need to make sure that if you're getting the house, that it's directly says that within the divorce paperwork, because we don't need to do anything. We just take that paperwork and go and file it, and that is what all we need in order to you know have that one person do it. But a lot of people just don't know all of those little things that, you know, a lot of times you just want to get out.
Right.
Like, I'm done with this, I'm done with you, peace. Well, okay, that's all cool and things, but guess what? Now you want to sell a house and you can't without that person.
Right, which sucks.
So, what I say, Attorney London, don't buy no house with your boo.
Oh, this is Attorney London and Njeri.
Njeri London. Attorney London and Njeri. Don't buy no house with your boo. Huh, my last name need to be your last name. And then we can go and buy some houses together.
Okay, but it's 2021, so people don't really listen to that.
I know.
So let's
the
say
new generation babies, the millennial babies.
Spoken like she's not a millennial too.
I'm really not a millennial.
You on the cusp.
I'm disclaiming that cuspness of the millennial.
Technically, depending on what you look at, if you were born like 1980, the 80s baby, you're a millennial.
Yeah, but that's what they're talking about.
Okay.
That ain't what I use.
Okay. But so let's just say if it's still like a couple that buys a home together and they're unmarried, do you think there needs to be like paperwork set in, kind of like a prenup? Doesn't it be something set in already that says if we marry, of course if you get married then there's a whole other things, but if you do not get married and someone decides to leave, would you suggest them getting some type of paperwork done too?
Yes, I do, and that is something, you know, that's really, that you should definitely do, because at the end of the day, even marriage, I mean, they don't last forever, but the best thing that they have when you're married is you have just the written laws of community property. Unfortunately, that's not what it is for unmarried people, and so definitely there should be something in place to help protect all parties. So it's not saying that something's going to happen, but it's just a protection of your two, the assets that you have, because a home is a lot of times your greatest asset.
That's true.
And so that's what you're doing. You're protecting that asset. And there are things that, you know, some people can do. You can, even if you decide not to be together, maybe one person can refinance you out and buy you out. I mean, there are things that can happen, but I definitely agree with the premise that if this is what you're going to do, have something in place to protect you.
Yeah, and I think probably the reason why a lot of people don't do it is more so because they thinking this is the next step to the next step. I didn't say give your personal opinion to that one. But that's how a lot of people think, because some people that is the next step, and it could be too. Would you still say that they would need to do something like this if they're engaged?
So if they are engaged to be married, okay, hold on. And we ain't talking about no 5-year engagement. Like, we talking about like your wedding date is like within, you know, a couple of months. No, you won't need to do that.
Okay.
Because, you know, you're going to sign. The thing is, what happened is you're going to sign as your individual, as, you know, single persons. And then once you get married, and you have a record of that, like how long you've been married. Because there's also some questions that we ask as a title company, which actually is your marital status and, you know, when you got married and who you got married to. And so that would help clear that up in that sense. And so you, again, will have that protection.
Now, what would happen if they were engaged and they bought a house together and they never made it to the...
It don't. But then engaged ain't married.
I know. But if they don't ever make it there... does paperwork still need to be involved? Or like, because I'm just thinking of protection in general.
See, I guess, you know, but then that'd be a whole, like, what's the purpose of being engaged? So you just engaged, say you engaged?
No, because some people get engaged and they might go buy a house together and they just don't get married. Jerry, don't act like you ain't never seen situations like this.
I was about to say something. What's the point?
Life, everything happens.
Well, if marriage ain't in your sight, if
no, I mean it could just be something happened and they just didn't make it to the marriage.
You can go to the courthouse and want nobody know.
We're gonna have them edit this part out. I'm about to give so many different scenarios that I've seen so many people be engaged and don't make us a finish. Like, now, I never work with people who are engaged, buying a house, and they never got married. That I have not seen.
So why are we even talking about that?
Because I've seen it in life. So I have questions. I've seen it in life where people get engaged and they don't make it to marriage. It's Jerry. Don't act like you know everybody you have seen get engaged and made it to get married.
Well, they ain't buying no houses neither.
Maybe
I mean, it just, God, it's beyond me. I mean, that's not to say I don't see people get engaged just to be engaged, just to say that I got a fiance. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that in the premise that we're talking, because we can have so many hypotheticals and so many situations, and sometimes you don't have an answer for everything until you really just look at all the facts and just kind of go from there. But if you are engaged and y'all just happen to not make it down the aisle, then
that's the word I was looking for, down the aisle.
Is that what it was?
That's what I said, the stand. I meant down the aisle. I'm sorry.
I didn't even hear you. So
I was trying to get it, but my mouth kept wanting to say stand. Like, down the aisle is what I was looking for. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, I'm listening.
So in that situation, I mean, yes, you definitely, because again, you're not looked at as a married couple. So if anything was to happen, then you don't have any laws that are protecting you. You don't have anything that's protecting you. And there are like agreements that you all can do and that can be filed of record. Especially in situations like that. Like you can have what they call right of survivorship, meaning that if maybe you are not even an engaged couple, but just a couple and you're married, and you can have paperwork on record that say that if one person was to pass, their rights to the property automatically transfer over to you. And that way you're not dealing with outside people coming into now this your home trying to say they need a piece of it. So there are things that you can put in place that can protect you. But as far as, just we going our separate ways after we've been engaged for, 20 years, at that point I'm saying, hey, y'all common law married. So
that's where I want to get to. How does that? Because I worked for a nonprofit in Dallas, and a lot of people we would see be common law.
Right.
And so how does common law affect real estate?
So common law, you have to go look to see, but I want to say, and it's been a minute, y'all, but you have to have lived together for a certain amount of time, which I believe is 2 years, but don't quote me on it because it's been a minute that since I've looked at it. But common law, you have to be married or living together and putting it out to the world as if you're husband and wife. So that's really key. So just not just living together, but you are actually putting it out that, hey, this is my husband, this is my wife. And that can be as simple as y'all saying this is my husband, this is my wife. It can also be you have kids together. And I actually had a client like that where I thought they were married, but I realized they had two different last names, but they never got married, but they call each other husband and wife. They had kids, and so luckily they weren't divorced and they were just still going through the process while selling their house together. But they held themselves out as married persons,
right?
And so. And there's like just a paperwork that you can fill out and file it, and bam, you are recognized as husband and wife. So you can definitely do that. And you can do that even if a person is deceased. If one person can attest to it. So, but that's going to be a whole nother story.
I was like, that sounds like a whole bunch of cans of worms being open.
I mean, that's going to do with anybody. But if a person can, support an affidavit saying that, hey, we was married. That was my husband. Girl, that was my husband. And that was my wife. That was my old lady.
which makes it
because back in the day.
Yes. It's just one person has to hear that, right?
Right. Okay. No, seriously, one person. Hey, that's my old lady.
Because that happens, and I get those questions. It's funny because I have these conversations with my friends too, and I'm just like. I say a lot more on the legal perspective with my friends than I will with my clients.
But she's not an attorney. She's not claiming to be an attorney. She's not trying to practice anything like that. She's just saying, hey, from my experience.
Yes. So because Texas is a community property state, so if they're common law, will they still need to have like a settlement or anything? To
No, because once you have established that you're common law, now you're married in the eyes of Texas. So now the community property laws do take effect.
Okay.
So pretty much this is a mechanism for you to go through if you don't go and get married, but a matter of way for like, because say for instance, because this comes into play. It could come into play when you're buying a house, and because a person is trying to have evidence of a common law marriage for divorce purposes because they've been together all the time. Now they're like, oh wait a minute, I've been doing all this for the last 5-10 years.
I deserve. Cue Mama D. I deserve.
I deserve. Was it I Deserve a song?
No, it's I Deserve. I watch enough Love and Hip Hop to know it was I Deserve. So it definitely is, because and that's what when people just do it, they may do it for the reasons where they now want to just be married and make it official. And then also too, you have situations where, hey, wait a minute, we ain't together no more. We've established a life together. We have a lot of things, and so now we're going to institute a divorce because that's really what we're doing. Even though we probably never went down the aisle and did, filed the marriage license and do all of that. Right. But technically, we've been married, and for at least the minimum of 2 years. So what you got is mine, and what I got is mine. Got it. I'm gonna pause this.
So.
Let's just see other things. What are some other things you've seen just in real estate and relationships? Like, what about even relationships with children and parents and home ownership and things? Have you seen anything crazy that route?
You always see stuff crazy. Typically, what would happen is you'll see it crazy when there is a deceased person, and so it kind of goes into love when you have persons who are married, but all the kids that they have are not the kids. All the kids of the marriage, meaning that somebody probably brought in another child. Not like they brought in another child,
meaning they had kids before they got together. Yeah, I just said that, but please clarify that.
Yeah, let me just make sure. But even if so, if there was an outside baby somewhere, then that would trigger it as well. But generally speaking, you'll have that where pretty much mom and dad were together, for 30, 40 plus years. One of them passes away. It comes to find out that one of the kids was not both their biological child. And so now you start to have to go through, if there was no will, now you have to start looking at intestate. That's that right? Intestate?
I didn't go to law school, so I don't know.
If I mispronounce it, I'm sorry, y'all. But now you have to start looking at airships and things of that nature. And so you definitely, that's why it's always important to have a will. And I know that, we may feel that we're young and that, you always have time, but you definitely need to have a will or, some type of paperwork.
I've been thinking about doing one.
Yeah, you need to. You know why? Because you always think that you got time and you don't have time, and then time continues to go. Yeah. And you know who are the worst at this stuff?
Us.
Attorneys.
I wasn't expecting that one.
We are the worst.
Because you think I could do that tomorrow.
What I just said. You can put it off because I can do that. I can do that whenever. I can do it. I can do it.
Y'all can easily do it,
Yeah. But then, see, and the thing is, when you start really thinking about everything, you're like, God damn, it's a whole lot. Okay, we got. You know what? And then you make this is what happens. We start on it, and then we're like, okay, I'm gonna get back to it later. And then years pass by. And, your kids who was, my kids who are 4, they're gonna be like 21. Like, I probably should have did this.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that, because then that could also be an issue too when it's like both parents passed away and now the kids are fighting and there was no will. Yeah. So a lot of those things happen. So speaking of that, because I had talked to you about that before. What do you need to do in Texas if parents pass away and kids want to sell a home? Now I haven't been in this situation, but I have seen it where there's like a lot going on in the background between the people who want to sell and may not want to sell. And how does that work in Texas? I've seen it with friends in Louisiana.
Right.
I've heard about it with other colleagues here. How does that work if there's kids of deceased parents wanting to sell?
Well, they're kids of deceased parents. If everybody wants to sell, that's great, because we can all sell the property. But when you have it to where one kid doesn't want to sell, then, excuse me, I actually had it one time where it was some of the kids wanting to sell. I think it was like one person who was holding out. And the buyer was like, okay, cool. I'll just go ahead and buy the property. I'll buy everybody else's interest. And then I'll just fight that person, that one who don't want to sell, for their little interest. Which I would not recommend in doing that, because that can end up being an expensive battle. But pretty much everybody has to be on the same page.
Yeah.
You just can't, because you can't divest the person of title. You just can't do it. So if it's their right, it's their right. Now, you can divest it by legal means, but it's not something that, just because I say I don't want the property or I want to sell, you just can't take it from them. So it's very important, even when, someone passes, even if they don't have a will, you all still go to the court, still initiate probate. You don't have to have a will in order for you to initiate probate. And the reason why you want to do that is because you make it clean. You appoint someone to be an executor of an estate. You don't have to worry about getting 5, 6, 7, 10 people sign it. We had one, it was an affidavit of heirship that we had to do.
And explain what probate and
so what probate is pretty much it's the court system that you use once a person passes. And so when you go to probate, a lot of times you hear about probate because someone has a will and they're getting their will probated. And so that means that basically the will that that person has, they're going to take it to the courts, and the court is going to follow the will for the most part, as long as it's not contested or what have you. And pretty much puts everybody, all the creditors on notice and all that. But if you don't have a will, you can still go to the courts, and there are different things you can do. You can do a small estate affidavit, a monument of title. That's where all those little intricacies, you definitely need to go speak to an attorney if that is something that that you are a situation that you're currently in, that someone has passed and you're trying to figure out how to properly dispose of the property. Then you'll speak to an attorney to get guidance as to what route to take. And then the other one that is commonly used is called affidavits of heirship. So those are the people who don't necessarily go to the probate court, but we need to clear up title. And so that's when a person dies, they didn't have a will, or they may have a will, but it wasn't probated within a time allotted. Then, we have to identify who their heirs are, so that way we can sell the property.
Got it.
So it can definitely, it's a whole lot. There's a whole lot. But then, you have a person where I had the situation, as a matter of fact, as of yesterday. Because, sometimes people think, oh, well, my brother passed away and he loved me so much. And so, I'm going to take care of this property, and it's going to be my property. And it's been 40 years. And no one did nothing but your name somehow got on the property. But guess what? You didn't do a probate for your brother or your sister, and they was married, and they had like 10 kids, and everybody dead. So, a lot of it is education. I'm glad, me and Andrea are here, speaking to you at this, because a lot of times we're not educated enough. And that's how we have the situations where people think that, I was married, but I'm not married no more, so I don't got to sign. Well, y'all was married when you bought the house, so no, you got to sign. Or, I'm selling this house, and I was single before, I got in this relationship. Well, you still got to sign, because now you got to stay in this house for, at least 6 months, and so now it's your homestead. So definitely, and this is what I always tell people, it's always great not only to always speak to an attorney in situations, but to have the right realtor, because even if you don't know, or even though your realtor can't give you legal advice, she got somebody on that team that can help advise you, hey, this is what y'all need to do, or this is how it needs to be done.
Right. Speaking of that, when it comes to heirship of affidavit, what happens? Let's say they had 5 kids. and let's say two of those kids, like the parents are deceased, two of those kids are deceased. Do we now need to go to those kids in Texas?
Mm-hmm. You keep going down. So the way Texas goes, you go down, down, down until it runs out, and then you go up back to the parents, and the parents are deceased. Now you go to the brothers and sisters, but it can get kind of messy depending on how many siblings there were. So like typically, for me to do it, I'm like, hey, 1 or 2 affidavits. Once you start getting the 3, 4, 5, y'all need to go talk to an attorney who practices this regularly, because they can, really sit with you, because, and we've had it, it was 15 people signing. That was not nice.
I can imagine. And I think I wanted to have this type of conversations because there's a lot of things that happen in the world of real estate when it comes to title.
Exactly.
That people don't think about. So like when I'm working with people on buying and selling, we have to say what the title company's process is. And the title company's process to make sure that you have clear title.
Yeah.
To make sure that no one can come and say, I own that house.
Because we've had that happen. Not we haven't had that happen. But, sometimes things get missed, and that's no matter where you close at or what have you. That's one of the things we definitely try not to miss is the person that's entitled, because that's huge. But, even if you have someone who's passed, and what a lot of people don't know is if you have someone who has passed and they didn't have a will and they have children, you can't just sign for your child. Like, that probably was my baby daddy, but you can't sign on behalf of the child. We think that, we're naturally that child's guardian, so we can sign. But no, you actually have to go get appointed as a guardianship, and they have to approve the sale, because you can't just sell a child's property or interest in the property without approval.
So is that if the child's under 18? That's interesting. See, I didn't even know that question to ask.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we had that. And they were like, well, we'll sign. No. And they was in California. So, they were in California. It was for a Texas property. It was like, well, you have to do guardianship here in Texas before we can sell this property. Because you just, again, as I stated before, you can't divest somebody of title. And, obviously, if a child has an interest in the title, court wants to make sure that it's going to be in the child's best interest, because when you have situations like that, then what ends up happening is the money will go like into a trust, or like the court will make the parents set up a trust for the child, so that once they turn 18 or of legal age, they'll be able to get it. So there are proper measures set in place to protect, kids in situations where they may have inherited some property.
Okay. That's interesting. That wasn't something I was going to ask.
Yeah.
So I like that. Because the thing about it, when it comes to love and real estate, it can go pretty deep. And we talk about relationships all the time.
Yeah.
As we started talking more, I started thinking relationships can go outside of spouse or just a couple being together. It can go into family relationships and how that can happen too.
Because you may buy a house with your siblings. Because we've had that where siblings, maybe they're buying a house together for, whatever reason. But if they're married, there are certain things that you can do to make sure that the other spouse, or that the outside spouse, the non-purchasing spouse, doesn't have any rights to that. Or you may want them to have rights. But if there was an intent for you and your sibling to be the only owners of that property, and it not to go to your spouses, then there's certain paperwork, or the way that you're deeded the property, it has to be in a certain way. Because if you're married, because you'll hear stuff, well, you can't purchase property if you're married. No, you can purchase separate property while being married, but the paperwork just needs to reflect that. Because the thing is, a title company don't know your business. They don't know who you are from Adam. But all they're doing is they're just looking at the paperwork that they see. And if it says married, they're not, hey, but this person needs to come join. Unless there is some type of, and what will happen is, well, they can do like affidavit of homestead, to where they can say that, oh, this was my homestead, but the property that is being sold is not my homestead. Well, then, okay, guess what? The other person needs to sign. But again, there's still paperwork that has to be done. So fortunately, it isn't that easy, just me saying, it is or it isn't. You actually, paperwork is involved in everything, because that's the documentation. And the way that everybody's put on notice as to who owns the property is by recording it in the county that the property's in.
Because I remember, like, one of the first few classes in real estate is just really the title of how you set up a contract. And of course, we don't really put in. I've seen it in some people. I'd be like, they must be new, but you don't really put in, like, let's say Njeri London, married woman. Like, although when you're studying real estate, they're like, you need to put in single person. And like, nobody does that. But that's kind of where it can be deeded as Njeri London, married woman, buying properly separately.
Exactly. Okay. And one thing, you talked about contract, and it made me think about, in executing a contract, if you're married, your spouse needs to execute that contract as well. Because there have been times where only one person executes the contract. And like, well, I'm married. Well, you do an amendment, but then they win this contract, and then you need to initial this contract.
Right.
So it's things like that. Like, even real estate don't even realize that. Yeah. Like, how you this contract? They can't sell this property. Like, he owns his property. Yeah,
because I've had those conversations with clients. They're like, well, I'm the only person on the loan, and I'd be like, but y'all are legally married, right? And I know this person stays here, so they need to sign off on that too. But that's good information too, because sometimes people just don't know, and you assume, and then you start asking people who have no law degree. Like, I'm not even putting my mom out like that, because she told me some stuff that I was like, it didn't make sense when she told it to me.
And I'm gonna tell you who are the most lawyers our parents. I've had my parents try to beat me down. That ain't true.
A whole attorney, they be like
that's not how that works.
Listen, Mama, it's funny because I've said this too, because I had a situation when I was talking to an attorney before we did this video, and I was like, so I just wanted to defute what my mom said, because I feel like it's a bunch of hot mess, but let me just ask you. And she was like, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's the how. But in their mind, it makes perfect sense,
right?
And you cannot tell them wrong, and especially because their children.
Yeah, they know more than us.
Of course, it's like,
despite they was like, all the education in the world, you still don't know more than me.
Right. It's like, that's not how it is.
Right. So also want to give, I guess I could say this is a disclaimer, that this is geared towards Texas.
Right.
And what a lot of people do not understand about real estate, a lot of things is really local, and it's really bound on your state,
right,
your city, your county, wherever that may be, because they have different laws in different states.
And let me also make a disclaimer that I am in no way creating an attorney-client relationship with anybody who's watching this video. This is just free information. I'm just talking with my girlfriend. And if you have a specific situation that you need to speak to an attorney about, you need to reach out to an attorney, so that way they can identify what your particular situation is and come up with a solution for you.
Yes.
Again, this is not an attorney-client relationship. I represent none of you.
Right. And I think it's just with real estate, everything is very local. Everything is very local about a lot of different things that may happen. It's just like when people are just like, oh no, that's not the way you should buy a house, or well, can't they do this and that? And I'd be like, not in 2021. And
that's gonna be a whole nother video.
Yeah.
With buying a house in 2020.
One.
Yeah. 2021.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball game. But we just want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you have liked this video, make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel. We're going to bring more to you. If you guys love this session, hit us up and see what other things that we can talk about with consulting and attorney in real estate.
Bye.